to you today about injury prevention in running. And I think before I start, I just wanted to say, most of what I'll say over the next 15 odd minutes is specifically related to the longer distances. So more endurance running type of activities as opposed to the short bursts. We're not talking about track sprints. They're two very different things. We're not talking about team sports training and competition, high speed running, etc. That's a different argument. So please bear with me and try not to point out too many holes in my arguments here. It's also worth mentioning before we get into any of the actual research that the term injury prevention is pretty misleading because most of us should, I think, appreciate or know, or certainly anyone in the medical side of things, is that you can't actually prevent injuries as hard as you try. You don't know if your action today is going to stop an injury tomorrow, because if the person isn't injured, you don't know if they would have been injured. So the best we can do is try to create an environment where injuries are less likely to happen, but we still can't say which of our interventions specifically protected which individual. So it's all about group approach, if that makes sense. Okay. So the first thing I wanted to get into is just around the knowledge, attitudes, and beliefs. And again, anyone who I suppose follows research would understand this is a very important part of kind of anything that we try and study, is trying to understand what people believe, why they believe that, and what their attitudes towards those beliefs are. So a number of studies have been done in this space with regards to running-related injuries. The first one on the left-hand side, does everyone understand the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic? Hopefully that's been covered earlier, but effectively intrinsic factors are things that are to do with the individual, that are, for the most part, their own personal situation. Extrinsic is the surfaces they're running on, the shoes, the kind of training, etc. So, intrinsic factors. Saragiotto, 2014. Recreational runners described lack of strength, not respecting the body's limitations, and foot type changes as being factors that could lead to running injuries. Similarly, the extrinsic side, they said not stretching, excess training, not warming up, and wearing the wrong shoes. These are their exact words as per the survey, so we can dig into the details a little bit later. Basomi, 2025, previous injuries. They surveyed a number of experts and recreational runners, and the experts correctly suggested that previous injuries are an intrinsic factor, and then training-related errors as well. And the recreational runners said the running surfaces, so the surfaces that actually run on asphalt, concrete, track, grass, etc., were big factors. Runners perceived that footwear was more important to prevent injuries than healthcare professionals. So this is a survey done by Dylan in 2020, and they looked at a large group. And between the two, you can see the difference between the runners' beliefs and the healthcare professionals' belief. It's quite a commonly perceived risk factor that footwear is a big issue. And based on simply the last few talks we've had, you can see that that's not necessarily the case. In another study, 82% of retailers suggested that footwear reduces pronation compared to 55% of podiatrists, physios, and 29% of coaches. But 91% of that group all thought that medial support influenced injury management. So you can see how varied the views are on this. And this, again, we're talking about knowledge, attitudes, belief. This is not evidence. This is not proof. This is what people believe. So that there's a massive variety of beliefs out there. So when you're going to go and see a podiatrist, a physio, or you're speaking to your coach or your fellow runner, you're going to get a massive spectrum of views on what actually matters and what doesn't. Interestingly, the one on the left, the red rather, the last one on the left from Linton in 2020. So coaches and running group leaders believed that prehab led to strength gains, or that led to strength gains would reduce running injuries. The interesting aspect here is that none of these coaches and running group leaders actually implemented these changes into their groups because they didn't feel confident enough to do so. So there's also a mismatch there between what people believe actually works and what they're willing to implement. Stretching, wearing appropriate shoes, resistance training, balance exercise, wearing of orthoses. That's a recent paper by Wilk. And then another interesting one in the bottom right there is that the understanding that runners base their footwear choices on past experiences and people they trust and admire. So the first speaker in the previous talk, I can't remember his name, I'm so sorry, but the triathlete, that was exactly his talk, is his personal experience of what he had been through. So he's obviously speaking to a lot of people and they're taking cues from him. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Again, we're just talking about beliefs. Okay. So now if we actually look at the research and what the research tells us, a lot of these will be familiar, a lot of these will be common with what the beliefs are. There's a lot of research around previous injuries, and that's pretty much generally understood to be the largest predictor for future injury is previous injury, in running related injuries anyway. Increased age, so older runners. Muscle weakness. This is an interesting one because we all believe that muscle weakness is something that we need to address in runners. We have to strengthen the hips, we have to do this, we have to do that. And if we strengthen, as per the last panel and everybody else's talks, you'll reduce running injuries. Now, I've put Torsdal's 2020 paper and Stenison's 2023 paper in red there because they actually found the opposite. So Stenison found that runners who focus more on hip muscle strengthening exercises tended to ignore core exercises and upper body, and they had a high incidence of running injuries. So that possibly favors overall muscle strength, so full body, as opposed to targeting specific muscle groups, which is something that physios are notoriously terrible for. Everybody comes in, you have lazy glutes or glute amnesia or whatever nonsense term you've heard on Instagram. So you tell people to go and do this one magic exercise for your glute medius. But in fact, we should be incorporating everything. And similarly, Torsdal found that a 12-week self-directed home exercise program didn't reduce injuries in a group of athletes over 12 weeks who were participating in the New York Marathon. So that's quite interesting. 12 weeks of a group doing an injury reduction exercise program versus 12 weeks of guys just carrying on as normal. There was no reduction in injury, which I would have suggested there should have been, but there wasn't. Higher BMI, we know, is a pretty accepted intrinsic risk factor. Males generally tend to get injured more. Biomechanics is a minefield. We'll get into that a little bit later. I'll drop some comments there. And then chronic disease is an interesting one. So people who tend to have other comorbidities tend to pick up running injuries more than others. Extrinsic running factors. So inexperienced runners tend to get injured more often. Excessive weekly training distances. So people who are just doing way too much. Lower stride rates. So again, everybody talks about this 180 steps per minute. That's a professional athlete. Most people can't do that running up and down Marine Drive. So they tend to have lower stride rates, and maybe that's connected to the fact that they're more inexperienced runners, and that's why the lower stride rates is a factor. Lower running volumes. Again, interestingly, that Stenison paper found the opposite. That higher running volumes were actually more related to running related injuries. Excessive weekly mileage progression. This is an interesting one. The 10% rule. In fact, research has shown us that anything up to 30% is kind of relatively okay. There's so many other factors that you can't strictly say percentage per week is the factor, is the key. Less than 2 days resting weekly is quite a kind of easy one to factor in from a recovery point of view. And then footwear and orthotics or insert related factors with regards to running related injuries. That's been studied a lot as well. And then Ralph and Malisu actually found the opposite. Ralph found the opposite. Malisu found that basically the number one predictor of a risk of a future running injury with regards to shoes or footwear is shoe comfort. So it doesn't matter if you're a pronator, a supinator, you have a high arch, a low arch, whatever. If the shoe fits, so to speak, and it feels comfortable when you try it on, to one of our speakers' points, if you can't try the shoe on in the shop, you certainly shouldn't be buying it. You shouldn't be buying shoes online. Put it on, make sure it fits, and that's actually a pretty good predictor of what's going to work for you. Okay, so where does that leave us? It's pretty murky, obviously. I haven't given you any black and white actual information there, which is the problem that most of us face, or anyone on the medical side who's dealing with injuries walking through the door. So this is the Linton paper that I referred to, and this paper goes into depth about the fact that the runners that walk through the door are individuals, they're humans. There's so many different factors. So they require an individualized, supported, and multifactorial approach if we're going to try and reduce injury risk. We often, as humans, we want to have one thing to blame, because if you can fix one thing, then everything else works perfectly. And that's just not how humans work. So if you're not addressing multiple factors, like the comment in the previous panel about go up the chain, go down the chain, you can't just be looking at one little thing and thinking you're magically going to fix the problem. You have to look at all of these factors, probably, that we've discussed in the previous slides. There's very poor prediction that changing a certain biomechanical factor results in reduced injury. Again, going back to these gait mechanics or gait re-education, it's a great idea in theory, but all we have to do is look at the top 20 runners at the Valencia Marathon today. I guarantee you none of them run the same. So what are we actually trying to get people to do? What is normal? There's certain things that are acceptably, I think pretty much accepted, like landing with your foot strike underneath your pelvis. I think most people would suggest that that's pretty good. So technically you're not overstriding. So overstriding is a big risk factor for a lot of injuries, particularly medial tibial stress syndrome, bone stress injuries, etc. So there's certain things that we can pick into, but trying to re-educate someone's gait, first of all, has been literature shown that it's really, really hard to do that. The amount of time it would take to actually do that is probably not feasible for most people who actually just want to run as well. So it's probably worth picking out small little things and trying to change them versus trying to control somebody's, pelvic rotation while they run. That's impossible. You're not going to do that. So don't waste your time. Don't waste their time. Then with regards to running load, this is a really interesting paper that came out earlier this year from Franson. They looked at over 5,000 runners, and they looked at the amount of the increase in their running volume. And they looked at it in a couple of different ways. So their major measure was they described an increase or a spike in running volume as your run versus the average of the last 30 days, which is a new way that it's been described. Previously, obviously, you had acute chronic workload ratio, which was this last week versus the average of the last 4 weeks, and a week-to-week spike, etc. So they defined a small spike as 10 to 30%, as I mentioned previously, a moderate spike 30 to 100% increase, and a large spike less than 100% increase. How are we for time? Good. So basically, if you run, let's say, 12 Ks and your previous mileage average was 10 Ks over the last 30, or the longest run, that you ran over the last 30 days, was 10 Ks, then your increase was 20%. So your ratio is 1.2, your increase was 20%. That falls into a small spike, okay, which is pretty reasonable if you think about it. Like your longest is 10 and then you go to 12, that would be pretty much normal. Okay, so what they found that there was an increased rate of injury with even that much. So anything between 10 and 30. This is a large group of runners, a very large group of runners that they've done this in. And as you get up the spikes, the moderate spike was even more, the larger spike was even more, as you can imagine. If you double your mileage, so you run 20 and the previous longest you run is 10 in the last 30 days. The problem with this paper, and what's really interesting, is the limitations. Obviously, it was self-reported. So the athletes don't know what an acute versus a chronic injury is necessarily. They're not the best people at predicting that. They also didn't account for running experience. So you might have somebody who's been running for 25 years. They probably could load a little bit more aggressively than somebody who's been running for 6 months, and that wasn't counted. And they also didn't report on any other activity. So were they doing any cross-training? How were they recovering, etc.? And there was also no reference to the running intensity. Everything was done from Garmin. So it was a study done through Garmin, which is obviously a very economical and easy way to do a study, but they didn't refer to the running intensity and the history of running intensity in the runners. So massive cohorts of athletes, very interesting findings, but you have to appreciate that most of these things come with limitations. And like I said, that's part of the problem that we're dealing with when you're trying to identify all of these risk factors. And then the final thing is strength conditioning. Okay, so you've got bone stress injuries is obviously something that we need to be very conscious of with regards to runners. You need time away from running, and then you need gradual return to running when you get back. And strength and conditioning is a very, very important part of that, because you're trying to take load away from the bone and into the muscles and the tendons. But really, it seems like it's more of a load applied versus ability to resist load, which is kind of every kind of injury, if you think about it, whether it's acute or chronic, is how much can that tissue tolerate and how much are you asking it to tolerate. So strength and conditioning is an important thing here in this specific context. But again, there's so much heterogeneity with regards to the kind of resistance training that athletes are doing that we don't know what is good strength and conditioning. Are they only doing hip strengthening? Are they doing full body strengthening? How many reps are they doing? What intensity are they doing? There are just too many variables for us to confidently say that strength and conditioning is definitely the way to reduce injuries. I think conceptually and reasonably, we could probably all in the medical space agree that yes, you need to be stronger. But how do we do it exactly? Is again, you're probably looking at the individual walking through the door and trying to match the training to their specific issues. So this paper by Such in 22 suggested that low limb resistance exercise is effective for improving running economy and performance. And started to introduce concepts like isometrics for overloads, eccentrics, etc. So ways to sneak in load that aren't necessarily going to apply the same load that running introduces. So a large problem with a lot of the resistance training literature out there for runners is it includes things like plyometrics and pogos and the same kind of stress that people are getting on the road. So that's also something that we need to look at. So effectively, the summary of everything that I've told you is we don't actually know how to reduce injuries. There's a number of ways that we think and a number of ways that make sense theoretically, but practically speaking, the research is pretty much equivocal. So it's up to you, the clinician, when an injury walks through your door, when a human walks through your door, to try and work out what all of their variables are, what all of their factors are, and try and address them each individually. Thank you very much.